I'm going to use a washi tape. This is totally optional. If you're not a fan of white frames on your paper, watercolor paper painting, you don't have to use it. I like to use it because it helps me to keep my paper in place as well. So I'm just going to place this washi tape on each side of my watercolor paper. Make sure it stays. And I'll go over with my nail as well, just to make sure it stays in. One more. And here. So there's my washi tape. And now let's focus on a pencil sketch. I'm gonna start with the trees in the center, that's for sure. Somewhere here will be my center. And then I'll keep expanding. So my first one, I think, will be somewhere in here. This is gonna be a very light sketch, very light. It's just so it gives me an idea that I know the trees are here. These trees that I want them to be in this place. Let's add like this one here in the middle. We don't have to do exactly as in the photograph. You can use the photo as our guidance for the light, the most important. And then let's do the side ones. So the side ones, one that goes like this more, kind of turns. I'm going for this one right now. There's some in the middle. It's just so I have the idea of these trees being there. Don't have to be even, it's okay. The branch, though, I definitely will be painting this branch, that's for sure. So on this side we'll have like a thicker tree. Kind of pointy more this way. It's just so I know there's this tree, there's another one that I'm gonna add. This one, kind of leaning, maybe. And then there's more in the back. There's for sure gonna be trees in the back. And then we're going to have like all these shadows coming in, and we're gonna do that later, most likely towards the end. But the first thing I wanted to do is, since I was talking about all these highlights and lights, let's spatter a little bit of art masking fluid on the paper and let it dry. So we have these small spots of light because once we use masking fluid it will be white, like paper white. So this is my fine line applicator for masking fluid, art masking fluid. Inside is art masking fluid by Winsor & Newton, and it does have a needle, so it's a needle applicator. It's very easy to use it because you can kind of almost create lines and stuff. I won't need that for this purpose today, for this painting. I'm just going to use my old angular shader brush, 1/4 by Princeton. This is a really old brush I have, and it's perfect for spattering paint. It's old and it's damaged. I really don't care about it that much anymore. This brush is so old, but it's perfect because it's stiff. It's stiff and it's easy to do this kind of movement for spattering paint. So I'm just going to squeeze my art masking fluid onto this little piece of a lid, and I'm gonna close this masking fluid because I really don't need that much more. I don't think I do. We'll find out. All the spatter would be like here where we have all the light. So I'm just going to grab some on my brush. Again, this is an old brush. I really don't care about it. Please don't use any of your nice brushes because this masking fluid will damage it. If anything, you can use soap. So you would dip your brush in the soap, make sure you have some soap on it, and then you would go for masking fluid. So that's one way to do it. I just have a one designated brush for it, and that's why I'm okay with it. So I just spatter it. Just very small drops. Small drops of masking fluid. And I want more towards here, like closer to where the tree trunks begin. And just a little bit. We really don't need that much. It's just a little bit, just a few drops, basically. You can touch a few spots, so the spots are like bigger than the little tiny dots. I'm just creating this sort of movement. I rub it off my finger and I let these little spatters to fall on the paper. And this is how I'm gonna let it dry. So I'm pretty happy with like the small spatter. That's plenty for me, that's enough. So let's not overdo it and just let's let it dry. So let's create our palette. So what colors I'm going to choose? I already mentioned earlier, I was gonna do burnt sienna, yellow oak, Van Dyke brown. I'm gonna use some of the quinacridone red over here, just because it's a little more reddish. I'm gonna use neutral tint to darken up some parts of the trees, plus also over here, because this is all darker. I might use a little bit of peach tallow blue at the beginning while we're painting wet on wet and adding the first sun rays. There's a little bit of blue here, and I feel like there's a little bit of here too. And I could mix that tiny bit of blue with quinacridone red. Maybe a little bit cadmium yellow pale, just a little bit of yellow in the sun rays over here. So let's start building up our palette. So I'm gonna wet the entire paper, and then I'm going to start with the sun rays. And those are going to be created by using some of the forest colors already, but I'm going to go in lines. So some parts are going to be lighter. So I have that parts that are lighter and then a little bit darker, and I'll have to let that dry. At the same time, while I'm doing the sun rays, I can start working a little bit on the foliage here, the background. And then once it dries, I can start adding the trees and so on. So for now, let's just wet this paper. I usually wet my paper with either one brush. This is a flat 1-inch Black Velvet Series by Silver brush, and this one is 3/4. So they're exactly the same brushes, except that this one is 3/4 and this one is 1 inch. So I like using these because they're soft brushes, and this one is big enough to help me like cover this area faster. So I'm going to dip my brush in water. I don't need to wipe it on a towel yet. This is my towel here. I do wipe my brush constantly, but right now I am just wetting this paper. You don't want too much water, so keep that in mind. You don't want a puddle of water, just enough so you can see that the paper is wet. More water. Those are 2 jars, and they're just clean water, nothing else in it, just water. And slowly I'm just spreading the water. My masking fluid is for sure dry, so I keep going over because I want to make sure the entire paper is wet. And if I have too much water on my paper, I push it over to the sides, just like that. I just kind of drag it out. Okay, that's good. That's pretty wet, but there is no puddles of water. Everything is spread very evenly, the water. So to create these sun rays, what colors am I gonna need? Well, I'm gonna go with the yellow oak and some of the cadmium yellow pale. Over here I'm gonna throw a little bit of peach tallow blue, red shade, and these parts are going to be more like a burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of quinacridone red, some of the yellow. So I'm gonna grab a round 8 brush, Black Velvet Series by Silver brush. I'm gonna dip it in water, and first I just want to mix some of these colors on the side with the gold. Might as well dilute the gold. Well, the gold will dilute anyway because it's on the same area, but this is totally optional, so don't worry about it if you don't have the gold color. And then I'm going to add here a little bit of Van Dyke brown. I feel like I need more room for these colors. I just use this well, and this will be Van Dyke brown. And let's see, a little more here of this yellow ochre, yellow oak. And then I want some of this cadmium yellow pale diluted as well. And I already had some some of the yellow ochre here, and now it's kind of like mixing together. Not too, I don't want too much of it. I'm kind of going back and forth between these colors till I see that this is a nice shade. And then let me go with a little bit more of this Van Dyke brown. The colors always dry more pale than when you first see them on a watercolor paper. And then I can wet this well too, some of this burnt sienna, and there's quinacridone red. Move some of the Van Dyke brown here so I have different color variations here. Okay, perfect. So the sunrise, I'm just going to start painting them. So I'm going to rinse this brush. This is still the round 8 Black Velvet series by Silver brush. So now I'm just going to go like this, just like that. Those are going to be my sun rays, but I do actually want a little bit of my peach solid blue, a tiny bit of quin red, and I want some of this color in here. I'm gonna grab a thicker brush. This is a thick 3/4 flat brush, Black Velvet series by Silver brush. Wet it, wipe a little bit on a towel, and there's my peach solid blue, tiny bit of quin red, and I just need this color to be a little bit here. Just a little bit. The paper is drying, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rinse this brush and I'm just gonna wet it again. It's drying too fast, and I do need to create these sun rays. So I'm just gonna wet this whole thing again, even going over my last stroke, it doesn't matter. And now I have some of this bluish here as well. I'm gonna add a little more of that blue just in here, just over there, and that's it. That's it for that. So the paper is wet again, I don't have to worry about that. Now back to this round 8 Black Velvet series brush by Silver brush, and create these sun rays again. Again, we haven't really started yet, but these are going to be the sun rays. So those are going to be our sun rays. And just go in the directions like we see in the photograph, basically. These directions. I can feel a little bit of that warmth from burnt sienna. I'm just gonna add a few strokes like that. Just a few of these strokes. And just go in between, kind of make sure it all spreads nicely. Now there's a paper towel. I'm gonna use this on top because I want this part to be white. I want it to be really light in colors. A little more of this yellowish, brownish color, which is kind of yellow pale, yellow ochre. So we just continue adding these sun rays. Okay, so we have the base of these sun rays here. Maybe a little more, this time a little bit with quin red actually. I just want some here. A couple of them here. Just looking at the photograph, I feel like this is more brownish. But we will work on that. We'll have more of these. Okay, now let's go for the base, which is this fauna here, the flora. We want some of these colors already in here before it dries. So burnt sienna, Van Dyke brown, and we could use some of the yellow ochre as well. So let's go for this mix of, actually this is more like a quin red with some of the Van Dyke brown. We want to keep this part lighter, so lighter in color, and this part darker. So let's continue just adding these colors. So there's burnt sienna with quin red, and this is already drying. I'm actually glad it's drying because normally my paper does not dry this fast, but I get so many questions like what to do and how to handle this paper when it's just drying so fast. So I'm glad you guys can see this in my painting now, that it's drying so fast. All I do is just keep re-wetting the spots, and this is still painting wet on wet, and basically I can totally do this now because I'm adding the layer with different colors, and I just keep adding more and more paint. Just like in the photograph, whenever I see darker, I'm going to add darker, except the shadows. I do not want the shadows yet. The shadows will come later. What's important now is to make sure that I preserve some of the spots here that are lighter, and that I do bring in some of the coloration here, and this part is much darker of the forest. So I have to keep that in mind as well. So I will continue adding the burnt sienna with some quin red. Let's mix in some of the Van Dyke brown, and just add a little bit here, there. Whenever we see more reddish, we add more reddish. But again, we want to keep some parts lighter, especially in the back. But this part is definitely under shadow. It's much darker. Got that. We got these parts, the sun rays. Let's use some of the Van Dyke brown, more like here. So I can bring in more in a second. Let's go for, so the Van Dyke brown, some of this burnt sienna. I just keep adding more, just to create that texture of the forest before my paper is dry. And now let's mix in a little bit of neutral tint here with the Van Dyke brown. So neutral tint, Van Dyke brown. Just a few spots, like whatever we see darker, let's do it. But again, no shadows. Shadows are later. For now, just the whatever darker. I mean, they're shadowed darker spots. Yes, they are, because that's why they're darker. But I'm talking about like these shadows that come from the trees. We want to avoid these. We're not working on them yet. So I'm sorry for the confusion, if that was confusing. Okay. So we have some sort of a texture now, and it's good. We want that. Maybe a little darker here, just whatever I see I need more, or make it like a nice finish here. And then we can just drop some lines here. It's going to be initially for the trees. Later we can paint some of them actually already, and this is wet on wet. They'll kind of disperse, like they'll start disappearing almost because it's still wet, but we will have like the further trees already down. So we can start maybe some of these thinner ones, which would be in the back, very much in the back. Let me get the mix of in the neutral tint. That was neutral tint in some of the Van Dyke brown. Let me get some of the burnt sienna and quin red and Van Dyke brown. And I don't want to go too far with these trees. We're gonna take it slow. It's just this side, it's definitely under like shadow. Okay, that's good. We can grab the rigger brush, a script liner / rigger brush. This is a Escoda's brush Versatile series and size 0, so it's a longer brush. And we could grab some of this Van Dyke Brown and Quin Red and Burnt Sienna and just paint some of these branches. This is all like wet on wet. And this way, because we're doing this wet on wet, they will be less defined, because we don't want these branches to be too like strong. Since this is supposed to be more in the back. Mixing it, that part with a little bit of neutral tint. So we know something is there. I kind of use this brush for a lot of things. Sometimes it's even painting like lines. Like here we have these lines. And just creating some more texture basically. A little more texture. Texture and also like those shadows, but not the tree shadows yet. Those we'll be creating later. For now, it's just those trees, the very far away trees. The beginning of our forest. Something there. This is still wet, so it's like perfect. I can do these, because when you have like a pale wash and there's not too much water, but it's pale wash, the things will look like they're more further away when you paint wet on wet. I am actually focusing on these ones now. I don't know if they're here or the other tree. Either way, I'm adding some branches. Like I'm dubbing almost like on the paper, very lightly. Just adding some of these leaves. There's not that many. If you look at the entire picture, there's not much of that. It's a very like light colored picture. There's not much. But I can add definitely a few more of these, which are these branches in the back and with some of the leaves. Same mix, Van Dyke Brown neutral tint. And I can tell this is still wet because the paint just spreads fast. Here the papers are already drier, so I can do more of these, like, and they're more defined. Okay, I think this is pretty good for now. This is my towel, by the way. I don't know if it's always visible when I wipe it on a towel, but I always, from my jar of water, I go to my towel. I wipe the brush first, and then I go for whatever I'm doing, the painting. That's very important, because when you dip your brush in the water, you do not want that much water on your brush, unless, I don't know, I guess it depends on what you're painting, but you have more control when you have less water mixed with your paint on the brush, and when you bring it over onto a wet paper, so when you're painting wet on wet. So let's just let it dry. Okay, we are back and the paper is dry. Yeah, it's pretty dry. So we can start working on it again. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start from the left side, so we can use some of the paper towels if we want to cover this side, so we don't spray any paint, or so it's safe. So we're gonna start with these trees first. So let me get some of these paper towels over, and I place one here, one over here. I actually use this for my pad so you guys can see the trees that I'm going to be painting. We're going to start with the left side. The colors are pretty much just Van Dyke brown, burnt sienna, same colors we used. Now for the brush, you could use a softer brush for the trees or something more stiff. More stiff would be easier to control. So the brush I'm going to use is Perla series by Escoda size 4. It's a round brush. For some reason it's so blue, and it still has that stainy blue from my older painting. I'm going to go for this Van Dyke brown and some of the mix of it was Quin red and yellow ochre. And now I'm gonna start with the first tree, which is like, they're not the same anymore because I drew them differently here, but the idea is that there's one like here somewhere. Let me add a little bit of neutral tint to make it darker. I want it to be a little paler, so I'm not going to use that much paint, although it looks like I have a lot of paint, but once it dries it's not going to be as colorful. And let's keep going up. Kind of mixing as I go these colors basically. So that's the first tree. Extend a little bit. We'll be still adding another layer on top of the bottom part. So let's not worry about like the finish. And then let's go for the second tree here. As you can see, it's lighter color, so I'm just I see what I have on my palette, and this is the color I choose. This is like a Van Dyke brown, I believe it was with yellow ochre. So there's that tree. We can make it prettier. Make sure the shape is right. Okay, and let's see, let me grab a smaller brush. This is a round Zero Velvet Touch series by Princeton. I'm going to dip it in water, get some of this neutral tint mixed with Van Dyke brown. And some parts, like the outside, is a little darker. It's a little too much, but I want this edge, this side, to be a little darker here of the tree. So I just want to darken up this side a little bit. So neutral tint and Van Dyke brown. The same thing with this. Just darkening up this side. I don't want this to be not ending here, but I want all the way to all the way touching the washi tape. Okay, so we got these two trees. I can't really refer to the photo anymore because it's just the general idea of it, because I changed it so much. And now next tree, let's use the same mix. So there's my yellow oak and Van Dyke brown with some of the burnt sienna, touches of burnt sienna, and more water, more Van Dyke brown. I guess I want a little more of burnt sienna and Van Dyke brown. Until I see the right color, I keep adding. And then just water here, and then keep going up. I guess you want the thickness of the brush, how you want to paint, how thick you want the tree to be, because then it's easy just to do it in one stroke. Because I don't have to go that many times over. And let's just kind of like make it all the way here. And then let's, with the round 0 brush, Velvet Touch Series by Princeton, I'm gonna grab that mix of Van Dyke Brown and Neutral Tint. And the same thing is going on this side. Just adding from one side the darker tone for the tree, and then a little more of the yellow ochre. And I'm not gonna touch these yet to these trees because I don't want this to blend too much together. I just want to paint this other tree, but I don't want these to mix yet. I want this tree to stand alone. I guess I kind of separated it, which is fine too. Okay, and then the rest of it, and I'll connect these once they dry more. And now with the Round 0 Velvet Touch Series by Princeton, I'm gonna do the same thing and add the darker, but I need a little more of Van Dyke Brown, and I have too much now, so I'm just gonna get rid of it and then paint this line from this side. I kind of connected it and it's fine. Okay, that's good. Now this is drying. It's pretty much almost dry. I want to add branches. So to add branches, I'm going to use this script liner / rigger brush, size 0 by Escoda and series Versatile, and the same colors. It's just for the branch. So basically could be darker a little bit, but the same colors, just the same colors of these branches. This is too reddish. I want the same color, so I'm just going back and painting these branches here. More water. Very random. Try to hold your brush towards the end, because then the strokes will be a little more random. They won't be as controlled. It'll be more like a branch, like a tree branch. And I'm just, whenever I still follow this photograph, like whenever I see, like I use it for guidance, like where else could I add the branch. This one will be a little thicker. Okay, that's good. That's pretty good. So now I think we can move over and add some of these trees over here. So let's do that. Let's see. So these are the ones, let's say, and these would be the trees that we'll be painting next. So the idea is here, the first ones are much lighter. So I'm using the same brushes. This is a Round 4 Perla series by Escoda, dipping it in water, and I want these ones to be much lighter. So I need to use more water. That means I need more water. Now it's more visible, but once it dries, it will look paler. And I want even more water, because it looks like it's like becoming even more pale as we go up. So that's good. So I could add a little bit on the sides, darker tone, just on the edges maybe, of that mix of Van Dyke Brown and Neutral Tint. A little there, here. some branch. Okay, that's good. And then let's do the other trees, also pale washes. Like this one, for example, it's like darker and lighter, darker, lighter. That's because of all these sun rays. So we have to remember there's going to be the sun rays. So we need to actually remove a little bit of that. Make it a little lighter in the middle. So this one is going to be very pale in the middle and just tiny bit of color on top. Yeah, that's good. Let me use paper towel just to remove a little bit of the paint from this section here. I do want these sun rays to come through, and let me make sure I don't have too much here. So I'm going over with the wet brush. Just in one tiny spot here. So it's a little lighter. And now continue the trees. So they're darker on the trunk, over the trunk here, and then as it goes up, it becomes lighter. So that's fine. Fine, okay. Continue. Next tree, somewhere here. So parts are lighter, parts are darker because of those sun rays. But overall, they're much lighter in here, and a little bit darker towards the trunk. That's good. Let's paint another one right next. This one's a little darker. It's okay because I can go now with a wet brush and push that paint through and use it towards the top part. Like that. That's good. Let me use some of that darker tone brown and more on the bottom. That's good. So we got that. Let's add like one in the back here. One tree in the back in a very light color. Something's there in the back, very back. This too, like it has really pale washes in the back. Just very pale trees. So there's trees in the back, but we don't see them that well because the sunlight is hitting from this side. I'm just going over to make sure they look straight, like not straight, but they look like trees. And then I want to move over and continue adding these trees to the rest of the painting here. So we're gonna start with this one. It's like it's lighter on this side and it's darker on the other side. And also what we can also do is just use paper towel if we feel like there's not enough light for these sun rays, and just press on the trees just like that, and this way we have some sort of a light coming through here too. So let's now paint this, kind of like this tree. It's not really this one, but we can just say it's this one, so it's easier for us to visualize what we're painting next. So let's start a little lighter, and then from one side we'll go a little darker. More of that. More of the paint. Might as well fill it and then add darker tones. Dip it in water, wipe it on a towel, and then go on the side, the edge of the tree. There's some sun hitting from this side here. The sun rays are hitting here. And they're hitting like here too. Might as well show that already here in this tree. And then the parts over there are much darker. So I grabbed Van Dyke Brown with neutral. I'm grabbing Van Dyke Brown with neutral tint, and from this side it's a little darker. And I'm adding it in some areas. Basically whatever it needs to be a little darker. And then with the wet brush, so I wipe it on a towel first and just go over it, but make sure you don't have much water. This has to be like really wiped well on the towel. I feel like it needs to be a little darker. So might as well add a little more paint. Okay, and now let's just continue adding some more trees. There's one in the back. I feel like it needs more of that neutral tint this time. So neutral tint with Van Dyke Brown. It's a little darker from top, and then it goes like paler. Oops, I went a little too far. It's okay. I'll make this tree like that. I'm not gonna make it touch this one yet. I just want to make sure they have their own colors and they don't blend yet together. So right before I'll stop. So let me grab a little more to finish this side up. Like that. Okay, that's good. And the same color I can continue. These are getting like a little darker. If you can see the sketch, then that's great, because it does help to figure out where the trees are. If not, you can, once the paper dried, you can always go over it again with the pencil and create your trees again, so at least the lines, so you know where they end and so on. So let's just go for this mix. It's a little lighter here. And this tree gets close to this one as well. I'm just trying to paint this one here. And then it's much darker over here. With all these shadows, you don't really see the trunks that much. Now I can connect these a little bit, because this has pretty much become on its own, so I don't have to worry about it that much. That's good. And then we can keep moving. There's another tree, we'll just make it up, add it. I don't have enough Van Dyke Brown, I'm gonna squeeze more Van Dyke Brown. So Van Dyke Brown and some of the burnt sienna and neutral tint. And I'm just gonna paint this tree that I don't see. I don't have a sketch for this one. I'm just making this one up here on the paper. And this one is pretty dark. It's like the sunlight is hitting it, but from the top. So continue painting the tree. I need a little more color on the bottom for sure. Van Dyke Brown, and neutral tint. Okay, So we got that one. I want to rinse my brush and kind of like go over with the just a wet brush rinsed before. I mean wiped before on a towel. And then the same thing here. I don't want too much of it. Maybe I'll just add a little bit of yellow ochre and that was Van Dyke brown. It's perfect. Okay, and now what we have left is trees in the back, so they will be very pale washes. Let's get some of the yellow ochre, Van Dyke brown, and let's do these trees in the back. I want them to be paler washes, so I need to use more water. And just go straight up. Can use a little darker too, but not too dark, much darker. We want these to be much paler, and definitely in the back. Let's add a few more of these trees. There could be some that go across. Some trees always look like they're gonna fall over. So might as well do that as well. Yeah, just paint that. Okay, so this is just the ground floor in here. Of these, there's trees in the back. Let's add some of the more of the yellow ochre and dilute more of this paint and paint the trees in the back. More water if you want it to be more pale and to show that something is there in a very long distance in the back. Some paler trees in the back. And the same thing here. Do we need actually more? I think we're pretty good with these trees. The sunlight's hitting it pretty well. So I'm adding some darker tones here. It's like this one is more dark in the middle. So let me go for Van Dyke brown neutral tint. I was grabbing Quinn red, but I actually want some leftovers of the burnt sienna. And let's just paint this tree actually, it's like in the middle here. So I need more paint. So Van Dyke brown, neutral tint, and let me get some of the burnt sienna. There's my burnt sienna. And there's the mix. And this tree, it's way darker. It's like it washes off with the other one almost. And it's like hides behind this one almost. So I'm just gonna connect these. Like that. These kind of connected too in a way, but not too much. Okay, there's one tree here somewhere in the back. It's very pale wash. A very pale wash here. So pale wash again, more water, much more diluted. Much more diluted. Okay, so let's see, do we have enough? Let's go for one more. This is when something shows on the top and it kind of disappears. because of the sun rays. But that was for the sun ray, and like leading it through the tree. And I'm gonna need the cleaner water. And let me just use a paper towel to lighten it up. Just to lighten this one up. So we have the sun ray, but I don't want it to be too visible. Not yet. I need these first to dry. Okay, so we have the base. Let's see if we can do now some more of the branches. I think I want to wait. Let's paint first the floor, the forest floor. So what we need to do is wet the bottom part again. This is a flat 1-inch Black Velvet Series brush by Silver Brush, and I'm just going to wet it. Not too far. I don't want to go too high. Just a little bit. Just where the trees maybe start kind of. It's okay if you touch some of these trees. We're gonna all like make it look together, like it looks together. It's kind of like wetting the trunks almost, so they blend with the ground floor of this forest. So I want this to be wet, and I want to wet this side. This is much darker. I need this to be darker. I don't want to activate the paint from this tree, so I'm just going to go right next to it. Okay, I think I just want it to be wet up to here about. No more than that. And now I'm going to grab the Round 8 Black Velvet Series by Silver Brush. And I'm going to grab the same mix that I was using earlier and just kind of drag it from the trees, the tree trunks, so they kind of blend more with the background. I still want to make sure that I have my trees and they have the trunks and stuff, so I don't want to go too crazy because the paint is still wet. But I can paint some parts already. So Van Dyke Brown and Neutral Tint and Burnt Sienna. And let's make sure we don't go everywhere because we want to preserve some of these lighter areas, the lighter spots. We're doing this to blend some of the parts together. And I need more Van Dyke Brown, even more Van Dyke Brown. Keep going through it, but I think this is still my first tube that I ever got of Holbein. So it feels like I used so much, but not really. So Van Dyke Brown, Neutral Tint. And then let's see, make sure you got this part in the back. We're just building up the forest, building up, and that's how basically I paint with layers and building things up. This is Van Dyke Burnt Sienna, Quinn Red, and some of the Van Dyke Brown mix. I just need it to be a little more reddish, but I don't want to lose a lot of the white spots, so I want to make sure they stay, and make sure I got the tree still in there. Make sure I got that. and darkening up a little bit the tops of these trees, just a little bit. And so we'll be able to do more of these sun rays. They're not as visible, but they will be. They will be more visible once this dries. So that's good. We have the floor of these. Now we can switch the brushes. We can take the regular script liner brush 0 Versatile Series by Skoda, dip it in water, and let's go for neutral tint and Van Dyke Brown and create some of these lines on the ground floor. More Van Dyke Brown. Some shadows in here, not the tree shadows yet, like the big ones, just for now the floor of the forest that we're building up. Some here, some there. The most important that we kept the light in here. So we have all that light, and then we can add more sun rays. This will definitely need more sun rays because the original first layer is too light, and that's why I can't add I don't want to add the tree branches yet, because those are going to be later on, more towards the end. For now, we could spatter some paint. I'm using an old quarter angular brush by Princeton. This is an old brush. This is the same brush that I was using to spatter the masking fluid. And we're going to spatter a little bit of the paint, just a little bit here. Just a little bit, just to create some texture. I just want the same colors with some texture. And I want this spattered so the lines are not even, so everything is more like a blend. A little more of the Van Dyke Brown neutral tint. And this is actually easier to create the shadows of the trees too, so we might as well do that. So I'm just gonna go where the shadows are. I'm just gonna spatter some paint already, so we have some path, the beginning of it, which will look more natural. And then we'll go over with the round brush just to make sure it's not too spattery, but so it looks natural. And then these trees go from this side. More like this. This is wet, so it will all blend nicely with the background. Might as well just use this brush to spread this. Perfect. Some of the neutral tint as well. So we have all these colors corresponding as well to these trees. I'm using this and just dragging the brush, and I'm just dragging kind of the paint up. So now I get some of these shadows in as well. Just adding some spots here. And I'm also dragging the paint out. So we have these lines. So it looks more natural when we drag it this way. More of this mix. Neutral tint, Van Dyke brown. I can create some of these lines as well here. The trees need to be a little darker here. I'm just dragging the paint up what I have already on this brush. If you don't have this brush, maybe you have like a flatter brush or angular brush. Even the round brush would be fine with this, just to do this kind of dragging up. Basically reusing the paint that we already have and using that for other trees. Okay, rinse my brush in water, leave that on the side for now. I need to add a few more darker trees in the back here, and maybe darken this up a little bit. So for that, I'm gonna use the round brush, Perla Escoda, and I'm gonna dip it in water and grab some of this mix of, it was yellow oak and Van Dyke brown, and just add a little tree here in the back, tree in the back here. We need more trees in the back. The same thing here, I need more trees in the back. Because it was too light in colors. Add some tree here. And then let's bring this tree down a little bit. So use some more of the Van Dyke brown, burnt sienna, neutral tint. Add some tree here. Add a tree here. So there's trees as well in here. So it's not just over there in the back. More of that mix. And let's add a tree here. Here. So now we have closer trees here on this side as well. And then let's see. Can start some trees here, but with the wetter brush. I'm just going to spread what I have on the brush. As you can see, I dip it in water, wipe it on top quickly, and then I go for the paint that's already here, so I can spread the paint. I have this sun ray created here, but it's okay. I'm going to create some more later. And some of this color, but just basically yellow oak. So now what we need to do is just let these trees dry. I'm just gonna fix this one a little bit. Just going with the wet brush inside of it basically. I want this one to be pretty. And then let me add more Van Dyke Brown neutral tint to this tree here in the middle. Lighter tone in the middle. I don't want to lose these foreground trees. Same thing with this one. I don't want to lose my foreground trees. That's good. And this one could be showing up a little more. Could be showing a little more. I think that's pretty good. And then the one in the back, bring it out a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's much better now. We have these trees, the foreground trees, the back trees. It looks better. Definitely better. So this is a regular brush, script liner Versatile series by Escoda. And there's Van Dyke Brown neutral tint. And let's do some of these branches. So try to hold, I guess, more by the end, so your strokes are more random. More paint. Let's just paint some branches. More water in the mix. Let's use the same brush for these kind of strokes. More texture here. Let just look more natural. Van Dyke Brown, some of the neutral tint. This is like drying, so I can do these because they stay, these strokes stay. And kind of very random, basically just like going for it without worrying too much. Let's see, what else can I do? The branch. These turn out a little lighter. Random, so as you can see, I'm holding this brush more by the end and just letting it do its own thing. The further you hold it, the more random the tree branch will be. Kind of just let it go and let it just do its own thing. Weird shapes, and don't worry if something looks not so straight, because they wouldn't be straight anyway. Wet some, and let's add some more. Okay, the only thing we're missing are the sun rays, the real sun rays. So we'll just have to wait till this dries so we can add more of them. What we're gonna do is just wet the paper and add some more of them. Same thing we did at the beginning, but we're gonna do it now at the end, more of the at the end, and then at the very end we're gonna add more branches. And of course we can do some more spatter as well. That would be nice. And around 8 Black Velvet Series by Silver Brush, dipping in water and going for this lighter tone here. I just want to add a little more of that ground floor here of the forest, since I kind of lost it in there. Okay, that's good. We got that. This is kind of drying, not dry yet, but it's kind of drying. What we can do is just add a little more of this reddish tone. So burnt sienna and quin red. Few strokes. Okay, now let's just let it dry. We are back and this is pretty dry, so I can start re-wetting it and create some of these sun rays. So first re-wet the paper, and actually I'm gonna switch my water. I'm gonna get some clean water. There's my white brush, which is the flat brush 1-inch Black Velvet Series by Silver Brush, dipping this brush in water. And slightly, I'm just going to wet this paper. Go slow. It's good to have a softer brush for this because it won't pick up as much paint, if any. That's why it's important that this is dry before we do this. Otherwise everything would just start being activated, the whole paint, and we will not have the same effect, the effect that we want. So let me just wet this bottom part. Okay, wet this. Now we're gonna grab the smaller brush. I'm gonna grab the 3/4 Black Velvet Series by Silver Brush, and I'm gonna go for the yellow oak and some of the cadmium yellow light. And now let's just try to add some more of these sun rays. Dip it, wipe it, and then go the other direction. And now some of the burnt sienna. And now I need some of the paper towel to make sure I don't lose the light. And let's add some of these shadows. So Van Dyke Brown, neutral tint, and add those shadows. I do need more paper towel. Okay, and now I want to add some of these quin red, and I need burnt sienna. Burnt sienna. And again, just look for those sun rays. Rinse it, wipe it on a towel. Clean this part. There you go, wipe it enough. And make sure this is lighter. So lift up a little bit. Lift up some part here, there. some part here, the middle section here, middle section here. As you can see, I'm going from the water to the towel, wiping it, making sure I wipe it. To create some sun rays over here, dragging the brush through the trees. Lifting up more. I'm using like the angle of this brush to lift up. Lift up this side more, pressing on the paper. If you have a durable, like good quality paper, it can handle all this, trust me. Cheaper papers cannot handle lifting up.